Good morning. It's good to see everyone out today, especially you that are visiting with us. We're glad you're here. And we're participating and continuing our study this morning in the book of Acts. We'll be picking up in chapter 24 shortly. But before we do that, let's take a look at chapter titles. Chapters 3 and 4. All right. First persecutions, chapter 2. I'll give you that one. Church is established because I hit the button wrong. Okay. Chapter 1. Jesus' ascension. There you go. Chapter 6 and 7. All right. Stephen's arrested, death at 11. Christians first in Antioch. All right. Chapter 8. Conversion of who? Eunuch. All right. Chapter 12. Not yet, not quite. Persecutions of what? There you go, there you go. Chapter 9, conversion of what? I'll tell you that. So, I keep hitting this button. Sorry, it's my bad. Chapters 13 and 14. There you go, that's the one. Paul's first journey. All right, chapter 10, conversion of Cornelius. All right, 15. Jerusalem conference. Good. 16.
Jailer.
Conversion of the jailer, you bet. 17 and 18. Paul's second journey. 19 and 20. Third journey. There you go. 21 and 22. Paul's arrest and defense. Okay. Chapter 23. Paul before who?
Felix.
Not yet. There's one spot in between. No. This is the Sanhedrin. His defense before the Sanhedrin. And then chapter 24 we're doing today before Felix. If you haven't got that one written down, do that one. Chapter 24, defense before Felix. All right. As we get into this, let's kind of reset things a little bit. Let's go over the questions on chapter 23, which will kind of set the stage as we get into chapter 24, because that all works together here as one big package, okay? So the questions on chapter 23. Number 1, who was the high priest?
Ananias.
Ananias, okay. Of what Jewish sect was Paul?
Pharisee.
Okay, there you go. What difference was there between the beliefs between the Pharisees and Sadducees?
One believed in the resurrection, one didn't.
Do what?
Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection.
Okay, all right. And then,
Spirits.
all right. And the Pharisees, just the opposite. Okay. All right. How many Jews conspired to kill Paul? 40. Okay. Who told the chief priest of this conspiracy? Nephew. Okay, sister's son, nephew. There you go. All right. How many men accompanied Paul when he left Jerusalem to Caesarea?
470.
Yes. 470. There you go. 200 footmen, 200 horses, spearmen, and 70. I can't read my other note, but 470. There you go. Good. What was the name of the chief captain in Jerusalem? I like this. I was waiting for somebody to tackle it. Go ahead. Yeah, what's this? Yes, right. Okay. What was the name of the governor in Caesarea? Felix. We'll talk more about him in a little bit. When he left Jerusalem, did Paul expect to go further than Caesarea?
Yes.
Yes, he did. And how do you know that?
Verse 11. Verse 11, God told him he would go to
A
Rome.
vision. You bet. You bet. Told him that he did well in Jerusalem, but he was going to go on to Rome. Good. Did the Roman officials in Jerusalem observe the proceedings of the council of the Jews?
Yes.
Yes.
What would you say?
I said yes.
Okay. How many yeses? It is yes. I mean, and here's the deal. If you go down to verses 28, 29, Lysias was told to bring him to the Sanhedrin. Well, Lysias was the Roman guy. Okay, and so he's there, and when the whole thing blows up, he doesn't know what to do except jerk him out of there before they kill him. And so yes, he went. Whether or not he understood it or not, that's the different deal. But yeah, he was there.
Romans had to pull him out of that crowd, or they were going to pull him apart.
Absolutely. So he's ready, and then that's the second time he's bailed him out. All right, over how many men did the centurion have authority? 100. Okay, they're good. All right. Number one, what did in the research questions, what did the law of Moses say about beating an uncondemned man? I'm waiting. Do what?
Say it was unlawful.
How do you know that?
Only in Rome.
Well, yeah, but Roman had nothing to do with the Mosaic law, though.
It was a Hebrew.
Right.
They couldn't do that unless they first had a trial and found him guilty, and they didn't do that.
That was the problem. That was what it was called the unlawful assembly when Paul starts that. Leviticus 19, verse 15 gives you some information about that. Go ahead, Billy.
Well, I just want to go back to the question whether there was 470. I only got 370.
You got to do the math, man.
That's what I need.
You got to do the math. It's 200. There was 200 foot soldiers, 200 spearmen, and 70 horsemen. 470 altogether. Help me.
Hey, let me ask you something. I'm gonna get probably veer off here. It says
Is this anything related to a movie?
It says 2 centurions. Ain't that the people over the 100? Would
Yeah.
it be 472?
Well, you could. I mean, yeah. Whatever. I'm just going on the numbers we got. All right. You're right. You could. You give or take. All right. Okay. Were any of Paul's relatives Christians before he was?
Yes,
How do we know that?
because it talks about his father being a Pharisee.
His father? Help me. Hold on a second. I got it. Romans 16 tells us something. Let me get there.
The son of a Pharisee on 23:6.
Okay. Son of a Pharisee. I got that. I see what you're saying. Good point. All right. Now, wait a minute. What's the question? The question says, was any of Paul's relatives Christians before he was? Being a Pharisee didn't lock you into being a Christian, right?
Right.
All right. It could have, but it didn't necessarily mean to. Romans 16, verse 7 says, in his salutations here, greet Androcus and Junus, my kinsmen, and my fellow prisoners, who are outstanding among the apostles, who also were in Christ before me. Romans 16, verse 7. Okay? That's a better verse. Your verse is good as far as 23 is concerned, but it doesn't necessarily mean, Pharisee didn't mean the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay? We good?
How many of your people was Christians before?
It doesn't say how many, it just says, was there any?
There was.
There was, yeah. Romans 16, verse 7. We got at least one or two listed there, okay? All right. Billy, did you get your 470?
Yeah, I finally figured it
All
out.
right, okay, good. All right, I want to make sure we're good with that.
I'm the 200-foot soldiers like Rome got.
All right, as long as we're good, that's all I'm after. As long as we're good. All right, so that sets the stage now, because as chapter 23 closes, Lysias has taken him custody again. He becomes aware of the plot of the 40 plus that's going to take that says they're going to kill Paul if he brings him down there again. And so by night he then moves him from Jerusalem to Caesarea, and things begin to develop then as they get there. Now in 23, at the very end of this, I want us to understand verse 35, because that's as the story continues. He gets to Caesarea. They hand him over to Felix. Felix here reads the letter that Lysias has written, what's going on as far as Lysias can tell him. And then he says, I will give you hearing when your accusers arrive also, giving orders for him to be kept in Herod's Praetorium. Apparently there was a guard section in the king's place, okay? And that's where Paul's kept. Now, he's not kept in any kind of situation that you would normally think a normal prisoner would be. People could come and go, could visit him, that kind of thing. Please understand as we take a look at this, and as Luke writes this, Luke's with him. Okay? Luke is staying in contact in this whole thing. And this 2-year time period that's going to take place, he's going to be here in Caesarea for 2 years. Luke's coming and going, Luke's writing, that kind of thing. So there's a relationship going on there, and also a documentation kind of thing going on as far as Luke is concerned. And catch this one, because I just caught it this week. When we read the Gospel of Luke, which is also an orderly account, if you recall how the book begins, as he begins the Gospel account relative to the life of Jesus and how he could take it to the crucifixion, and how Acts starts in chapter 1 from the resurrection, the ascension, chapter 1, back to heaven. Luke puts an orderly account together to do that. But when he writes the Gospel of Luke, we don't have a good handle on when he did that. Okay? The 2-year time period that's going to take place here, we're going to read about here in chapter 24, was a good time. We don't know that, but logically speaking, it would have given him the time to have penned that and put this whole orderly presentation together as he knew it at the time. So that's just a kind of an FYI and a thing to think about in a time frame that would logically kind of make sense when he could do that. So we'll see about that and see it talked about here in chapter 24 shortly. Okay, time period wise, Paul's in prison. This is going to be AD 58 to 60, and the reason we know that is because Felix, as we see this is going to develop, is going to be taken out of office. And let me start to talk about a little bit about Felix, because this guy's not one of your fine guys. He's not. Let's take some notes and look at some notes about Felix himself. First of all, according to history, and this is what we got to pull from the historical account of the Roman Empire. We'll call it that way, okay? According to history, Felix was the 7th year of his position, and Felix also knew the way of the Sadducees. So he was familiar somewhat with what he was inheriting here with this situation, although he doesn't know the details yet, okay? According to history, Felix convinced Drusilla, and we'll see that as she's part of this. This was Herod's daughter, Herod who murdered James the apostle, okay? To leave her husband and to live with him. Okay, he's convinced her to do that. Now, that's also an interesting, if you recall Billy's topic last, as he's trying to steal my thunder here, okay? As he presented that last week, he talked about the message that Paul presented to him relative to righteousness, to judgment, and I can't remember the third one, it's here, but you'll see it. Temperance, okay. This would have struck right at the base of that. Okay? This thought process would have hit him head on. Okay? Thirdly, Felix's brother Paulus, according to Roman history, had questionable background and character. In fact, Felix kind of had his position because of him. But Nero, as history points out, took care of Paulus, and he was out of the picture now, which left Felix out on a limb by himself. And when that happened, the things changed, and we see in 25 that Felix is replaced by a ruler by the name of Festus, and it's not the one on Gunsmoke. Okay, and so that's what takes place as far as the history is concerned, and so forth. Now, there's more notes with that, because according to Roman history, the Roman historian Tacitus was very critical of Felix. This is a Roman historian writer, saying that with all cruelty and lust he exercised the power of a king with the spirit of a slave. Feeling his brother Paulus could protect him, Felix thought that he was at liberty to be as cruel and unprincipled as he wished. Okay? And so he ran things like that. Okay? And we'll see why. I mean, Felix is going to ask for money here. Okay, and we'll see that. And this is kind of the nature of the way he was. Okay. Secondly, he ruled until his recall by Nero in AD 60. He lost his position as a noteworthy person with the execution of his brother Paulus in AD 63. So Festus is on thin ice. He's here at this time, and probably this is getting toward the latter part of his time period of being a ruler here. And so at this point, we see him taking this, and then in chapter 25, he's going to hand it off and do some things that way. Okay. All right. So as we get into chapter 24, and Paul is before Felix. Here's what happens. Felix read the letter from Lysias, and what did he decide? And we go to the last verse of chapter 23 to get that answer. Okay, he says, because I will give a hearing to you after your accusers arrive also, giving orders for him to be kept in Herod's Praetorium. So he's got the letter, he's read it, and he said, okay, when your accusers get here, then we'll start trying to sort this out. And we'll start trying to do this. All right. But in the meantime, who comes with those from Jerusalem? All right, let's take a look. Verse 1, chapter 24. Okay? And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders with a certain attorney named Tertullus, and they brought charges to the governor against Paul. And after Paul being summoned by Tertullus began to accuse him, saying to the governor, and we'll just stop there for a minute. Tertullus is a rented mouthpiece. He's a lawyer. Okay, I don't got to say a lot more than that, but that's what he is. All right, now why? What court are they in?
Jewish court, then.
Are they? Are they in a Jewish court or are they in a Roman court? They're in a Roman court.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well. All right. Roman starts with Jewish. I got that. That works. That's good. But he's in a Roman court. Therefore, the Jews thought to do their homework correctly and to present this the way that it should be presented, we need a Roman lawyer. And so that's what they do. That's what Tertullus is. So Tertullus comes in, and you can just tell by the sound of this has got lawyer wrote all over it. Just listen to this. Tertullus began to accuse him, verse 2, saying to the governor, since we have through you attained much peace, and since your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation, we acknowledge this in every way, and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with all thankfulness. But that I may not weary you any further, I beg you to grant us your kindness and a brief hearing. And I mean, it's just nonsense. Just cut to it. Let's get through all that nonsense. Let's talk about it, okay? And then he gets to verse 5, and he says, "For I found this man a pestilent fellow, a fellow who stirs up dissensions among the Jews throughout the world, a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, and he even tried to desecrate the temple. And then we arrested him, and we wanted to judge him according to our own law. But Lysias, the commander, came along, and with much violence took him out of our hands, ordering his accusers to come before you. And by examining him yourselves concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him." And the Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that the things were so. And then he just kind of stops at that point. So what the deal is with Tertullus, his job is to present this case and to present this information. Now, in the description of what he says, how true is it?
It's false. It's false.
Okay. What did he? Okay, let's talk about that. You're right. I agree totally. Paul's accused of being a pestilent fellow. What does that mean?
He's a pest.
Who is not a pain in the neck at times? Huh? Aren't we all? Who is not a pain in the neck at times? And we all are. Okay, so that means nothing. All right? All right, caused an uproar among the Jews. Did he?
No.
No.
Now bear in mind, we're talking about the situation in Jerusalem when he's taken prisoner in the temple. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about all the other stuff. We're talking about that situation. Go ahead.
The uproar was because of what they thought he had done.
Exactly. And that gets us to, the next point, thinking he's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. I don't know where that came from. That's out of left field totally. Okay? And then secondly, and your point is well taken, attempted to profane the temple. How? What? Right. All right. That's the thought process of what's going on. Now, these charges, any of these charges, if sustained, okay, would create an accusation. In other words, at this point, they've got nothing to hang their head on. They've got nothing that says this man is guilty of this and that's why he's before you. They're searching. Okay? Now, with this thought in mind and with what he says in his presentation, stirs up the, okay, and he talks about the idea, verse 8. Verse 8 is interesting. Ordering his accusers to come before you, telling him what Lysias was telling, and by examining him yourself concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things which we accuse him of. Examining him how? What did that mean?
Question of the things he done.
Examination under the Roman government meant we're going to beat it out of you. That's what that meant. Now,
that scourge people.
That's right. That's what the scourging was all about. This guy, Felix at this point, doesn't have the feeling that this is a Roman citizen yet. He will. But at this moment, when he makes that statement, or when Tertullus makes this statement to him, Felix doesn't have that thought in his mind. That certainly could be on his agenda to do. Okay, we'll beat the truth out of you, and then we'll get to the bottom of this. Okay, but that's not where it goes. So by examining Paul in the way that they would normally examine Paul, that might have worked, but they couldn't do that under Roman law at this point. So Tertullus gets it to that stage in verses 8 and 9. The Jews back him up. They say what he's trying to assert and what he's trying to say to you is correct. And at this point, Paul then is given the opportunity to make his defense. Now, what I want us to understand is that all this takes place with no preparation as far as Paul is concerned. I mean, he walks into this courtroom with a blank sheet of paper because he doesn't know what Tertullus is going to say. He doesn't know what the charges are going to be. He has no way to prepare for it. Okay? There's a very cool and just unbelievable passage that you might want to write down as a note because it's very cool about what takes place here. Luke chapter 21, verses 12 to 15 are an incredible set of verses that I want to read to you because the Lord promised in situations like this not to worry about it. The Roman court proceedings gave Paul no opportunity to prepare. He's without preparation to make his defense at this time. But he certainly got the feeling and understood what Luke chapter 21, verses 12 to 15 we're talking about. Let me read that to you. And this is in Jesus' presentation, telling them about things that would be coming to them. And picking up in verse 12, it says, "Before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and will persecute you, delivering you to synagogues and prisons, bringing you before kings and governors for my name's sake. It will lead to the opportunity for you for your testimony. So make up your minds not to prepare beforehand to defend yourselves, for I will give you utterances and wisdom which none of your opponents will be able to resist or refute." That's how he can take that position and take that on. a tremendous verse, and it had to come to mind. It had to come to
Pretty
mind.
confident, wasn't it?
Sure.
Knowing that you can always have the upper hand, so to speak. Like
And he already knows that this is just a step in the plan in going on. He's ultimately going to end up in Rome. He already knows that. And this is just a step in that. The Lord says, I'll give you your words. Don't worry. You'll be okay. And so, I'm sorry?
Verse 11 of chapter 23, be of good cheer, because
Sure. Yep.
you bear witness is wrong.
Yep. And so then Paul gets then ready then to make his presentation, and the governor in verse 10 gives him that opportunity to do so. So let's take a look at that. And a lot of this just makes pure logical sense. Okay? For example, here we go. And when the governor nodded for him to speak, Paul responded, knowing that for many years you have been a judge in this nation, I cheerfully make my defense, since you can take note of the fact that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship. How long has he been in jail in Caesarea? 5 days. Almost half of this 12-day time period he's been in jail in Caesarea. How am I going to stir up people while I'm here and they're there? Point number one. Okay? And neither in the temple, nor in the synagogues, nor in the city itself did they find me carrying on a discussion with anyone or causing a riot. Nor can they prove to you the charges of which they now accuse me. But this I admit to you, that according to the way, and we've already talked about what the way was, which they call a sect, I do serve the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men cherish themselves, that they shall certainly be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. In view of this, I also do my best to maintain always a blameless conscience both before God and before men. Now after several days I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings, in which they found me occupied in the temple, having been purified without any crowd or uproar. But there were certain Jews from Asia who ought to have been present before you, and to have accusation if they should have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves tell you what misdeed they found when I stood before the council. Or other than for this one statement which I shouted out while standing before them, for the resurrection of the dead, I am on trial before you today. But Felix, having a more exact knowledge before the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will decide your case. So, in essence, here's what Paul's defense comes up to. He clearly states that in 12 days he's been in Jerusalem. Since all this happened, 5 of these he was in Caesarea waiting for his accusers to show up. So then, how could he be a creator of dissension if he's in jail? Couldn't happen. Secondly, as this continues, he had no disputes in the temple, and bear in mind, keep in mind the stage. It's while he was in the temple in Jerusalem. That's why they're after him at this point. Now, what happened when he got to Jerusalem the first time and he talked to the brethren there? When he first got there, what did they suggest he do? How about the guys that needed to make the offering? You remember? Conclusion of the Nazirite vow, that he would accompany them. They would go into the temple and do the completion of that process in the temple like they're supposed to. That's what he's referring to. There was no disputes in the temple synagogue on any part of that. He was completing with them the law as it would be written relative to the completion of that vow. He states his belief in what the sect teaches, yet he too believes the law, the prophets, and the resurrection. There would have been a fundamental difference between what he was saying and what Felix is a Sadducee, Paul's a Pharisee. There would have been a fundamental difference between their thinking relative to the resurrection and things along that line. But he understands that he too believes, just like Felix understands, in the law and the prophets and the resurrection. You know, Felix doesn't get the resurrection part, but he gets the law and the prophets. All right, so, you know, he states that's what's going on. He was found in the temple being purified as the law required, almsgiving and offerings, not profaning the temple. You can't go into the temple and complete this stuff, which is where they found him and where they got him. And he wasn't profaning the temple when it comes to that. So when Paul starts to finalize what he says, a significant fact in the conclusion: those who seized him only knew what he did in the temple, and they were not present. Who were the Jews that were bringing the charges? Who were the Jews that got all worked up? Where were they from?
Asia.
Asia. Why aren't they here? Well, we're too busy. We got to go home. So that's what they did. They're not there. And so they ought to be in this. If this is that big of a deal, and we need to pursue this point, they ought to have been there. And of course, he states clearly that they were not. And he called them, I'm sorry? No, go
Why
ahead.
is Paul defending the rituals of the old law still, instead of just saying, hey, this is not to be anymore? See what I'm asking?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, the idea is that if you wanted to follow the traditions of the old law, do it. That's fine. But don't try to bind that on somebody who's not a Jew. Okay? Still the requirements of being a Christian are the same. Okay? But if you want to do that on top of being a Christian, okay, that's fine. But it doesn't. But you can't take that and make somebody else who's not a Jew comply to that. And that's what the whole letter of Acts 15 was about.
But you really shouldn't be trying to put that even on a Jew at this time, should you?
Exactly. But I've gone back. I've said this a lot of times that I get the feeling, and I don't know how you would do it, but my age now. And if I had been all my life following the Old Testament law, making the trips to Jerusalem, doing the sacrifices, doing all that, that was right. Okay? For me now at my age, because Jesus came, and for me to, in my mind, say, okay, I need to change all that, when I know I was right to begin with, I think I'd struggle with that too. It's not to say that it shouldn't happen. It should happen, okay? I think I would just struggle with it the same way some of these folks did, okay? So it's not just a flip the switch and make it. I don't think so, but I think so. Go ahead, Dylan.
When Paul goes into the temple, and he does finish this vow up, like you're saying, and these things, sure. But now when he's questioned about these things, and when he's talking to Felix, he said, I believe what the law says. Well, I believe, even in myself, I believe what the Old Testament teaches.
Sure.
I believe every word of it because it's inspired just like everything else. And if somebody asks me, do you believe in the old law? Yeah, I absolutely believe in it because all of it's inspired. I believe it just like the Bible says.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of it is that law is fulfilled, and I think Paul makes that point when you read verse 14 in this chapter. But this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy, that's Christ, that's Christ's way, so worship I God of my fathers, believing all things are written in the law and in the prophets.
Yep.
So he said, look, I believe all this. I believe every bit of it. But this law was fulfilled in Christ. Now I worship that same God in the way that now you call a heresy. That's under Christ's authority and by the New Testament.
Okay. Exactly. I mean, and so he's not. But as he presents all of this, I mean, he's taken the gas out of everything here that Tertullus has said. I mean, in a way that it just, what are you talking about? I didn't do the things that you've said that I've done. Here's what I did do, and none of it matches what Tertullus was saying. So Ananias and the elders call Ananias and the elders to declare any wrong that the Sanhedrin was done, and of course they can't, because he didn't. He didn't do anything wrong, and except make the one statement that he talks about here of in belief in the resurrection and so forth, and of course then the Sanhedrin just goes into a frenzy, and Lysias has to come down and take him out of it. So with all that said, at this point we get to the verdict, and the verdict is case continued, because he hasn't got anything to hang his hat on and to say one way or two. So what we're going to do with the case continued at that point, we'll pick up with this. We're out of time this morning. But what we want to do is we take a look at chapter 24. We'll pick up then with the response, with what Felix is going to do, and then we'll do the questions then for Wednesday night. Any thoughts, questions, or ideas? Anything
I got one question.
Sure, go ahead.
When Felix went before the council and everything, and they couldn't, nobody approved, what did they do?
It
Did
left.
they know, or?
Okay. Well, first of all, in Jerusalem, Lysias, the guard, the captain, lifts Paul out of that mob situation because, like I said a minute ago, they're fixing to pull him apart. All right, so Lysias keeps him in, but he doesn't know why that happened. All right, he gets word that they're going to 40 guys are going to kill him, and so he moves him to Caesarea to Felix. Felix doesn't know either. He's trying to uncover and determine all of this, and so he waits for them to come down with their lawyer to make their presentation. And so they make their presentation, Paul makes his presentation, and he still doesn't know. That's why at this point the case is continued. All right, so at this point we don't know. We just got to stay tuned. Okay? We're good?
Good.
Good? All right.